Good day, dear brothers and sisters. Here we are at day 24 of experiencing God's power, and I'm really excited to see in this chapter that we're looking at God's plan for our money and His purpose for our money. And today we're going to look at this as being an all-inclusive plan. You see, a lot of Christians think that we shouldn't be concerned with money because we're too spiritual to be concerned with money. But that's not the biblical view, because money really affects many areas in our day-to-day lives. And if we don't handle our money or finances in accordance with God's plan for our lives, it can really become out of balance. And you see, as a teacher of God's word, we need to teach that God has got a will also for our finances. As it said in Acts 20 verse 20, "You know that I've not hesitated to preach anything that would be helpful to you, but have taught you publicly and from house to house. For I have not hesitated to proclaim the whole will of God in your lives." You see, he also says in Romans 12 verse 1 that, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship." And that's the whole body. So spiritual worship includes our whole bodies, and it moves right into the physical world. And a lot of people think the body is not spiritual, but being spiritual also means doing the right thing with your body and with the physical things that we have. Paul also says in the next verse, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." You see, God's will is successive. It's good, pleasing, and it's perfect. And these are the three phases of our perception of the will of God. When we start to perceive God's will, we need to see that it is good, right? And Paul also pointed out that there are two essential steps in finding God's will. First, we must surrender ourselves without reservation to God. We must become a living sacrifice. And he was comparing us with the sacrifices in the Old Testament. You must do the same with your body. Put it on God's altar of service without reservation. And the second step to finding God's will is learning to think in God's way. Paul called it the renewing of our mind, changing our outlook, changing the way that we think. It really is in the area of our money. We should not underestimate our money, our thinking around it, or belittle it. It also represents strength, talents, and quite possibly inheritance. And it might be money or other valuable things. And when we invest our money, we're also investing a major part of ourselves, for good or for bad. And therefore, we need to see how important it is to invest ourselves through our money to do what is good and in accordance with God's will and plan. So we need to invest our money also in line with God's plan for our money. In 3 John verse 2, it says, "Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers." And the key word in this passage is prosper, which covers our physical health, our soul, and our finances and our material needs. And the will of God needs to be revealed in all these areas of our lives. So we can't just focus on this area or that area of our lives. We need to look at the full plan of God as being all-inclusive, also encompassing our finances.